The river didn't seem like an ordinary river. The water flowed slowly, but something on the surface reflected an inexplicable restlessness. It meandered between ancient trees, twisted roots emerging like black fingers from the bank, touching the water in almost conscious movements. There was a feeling that the river was watching every step, every gesture of those who approached. And sometimes, it seemed to call out their name. At first glance, it was difficult to perceive the danger. The sound of running water mingled with the distant song of nocturnal birds and the whisper of the wind through the trees. But if you listened carefully, you would hear something different. A low, almost imperceptible voice calling softly, an intimate sound that seemed to know your fears, your memories, and your weaknesses. Locals avoided the riverbank at nightfall. They said that whoever heard the river's call never returned. First came the confused whispers, then the strange sensations. Shivers down the spine, the body feeling heavy, eyes fixed on the current as if hypnotized. Then without warning, the river took what it wanted. And there were no traces, no struggle, just disappearance. A low-lying mist gathered over the water, distorting every tree and stone. Each reflection seemed to move of its own accord. Some swore they had seen submerged shadows gliding through the currents, human figures or something resembling human form, always lurking, always patient. The river did not attack violently. It persuaded, invited, called by its name. The smell of water mixed with wet earth had something hypnotic about it. The air grew thicker with each step, as if your lungs were struggling to breathe. And with each moment you hesitated, the river seemed closer, more intimate, more certain that you wouldn't resist. No one knew for sure how it began. Ancient stories spoke of travelers who heard their own name whispered by the wind over the water. Some said the river was a guardian, others that it was a living trap, remembering each person who passed by and calling them forever. One thing was certain: whoever listened ended up giving in. At first, nobody took it seriously. Some travelers reported hearing their own name being called amidst the whispers of the wind and the gentle sound of the water, but attributed it to their imagination or the weariness of the road. Until the first people disappeared. No trace, no cries, no signs of struggle. Just the emptiness left on the bank and the river continuing its course as if nothing had happened. The search began desperately. Flashlights swept the banks. Voices echoed through the trees. Footsteps in the damp mud echoed as if being watched. But no one found anything. The water remained calm, reflecting the sky, motionless, indifferent to human despair. Some survivors recounted the same terrifying detail. They clearly heard their own name being called, a sweet, familiar, convincing voice that made them approach the edge without realizing the danger. Then, the sensation of weight on their ankles, their bodies becoming heavy, their vision blurring. An instant, and they disappeared. Objects began to appear floating on the bank days later. Wet hats, shoes, pieces of clothing. Always close to the water, never in the center, as if the river left small traces of its presence, but never enough to explain what had happened. If this interpretation is making you rethink this story, leave a comment below with your perspective. These videos are meant to provoke reflection, and I read all the comments. And if this type of content interests you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. As time passed, the local population began to notice patterns. Those who heard the river's call tended to stay closer and closer to its banks. Some approached alone, aware of the danger, and disappeared silently. Those who tried to resist felt a constant pressure, almost an irresistible pull, drawing them towards the water. The river did not act violently. It seduced, manipulated, seemed to know what each person most desired. One traveler sought answers, another wished to escape pain, another sought recognition or fame. All heard the whisper and invariably yielded. Improvised cameras, positioned by curious onlookers or researchers, captured something disturbing. Not waves, not clear movements, just subtle distortions, shadows that crossed the water as if made of solid smoke. Small ripples appeared for no reason, always near the bank. The river observed and remembered. The river chose. The more disappearances occurred, the more intense the whisper became. Those who remained on the banks long enough reported seeing the reflection of their own face distorting in the water, contorting into expressions of fear or agony, as if the surface itself wanted to communicate something impossible to decipher. The tension grew to the point that even the bravest hesitated to approach. Each step towards the water was a test, a silent struggle against something that seemed to have a will of its own. The river didn't kill quickly. It gained time, built anticipation, made the victim's mind waver before delivering the final blow. In the heart of the forest, surrounded by ancient trees and black roots, the river continued its course, whispering names, always names, calling, persuading, watching, and each time someone responded, they disappeared without a trace. The investigation team advanced cautiously. Flashlights partially illuminated the banks, casting long shadows over twisted trees and fallen trunks. Each step on the damp mud seemed to echo in a distorted way, as if the river itself were watching, calculating every movement. The air was heavy, laden with moisture and an almost palpable silence, broken only by a distant, soft, and irresistible whisper. A name. They noticed patterns. The disappearances weren't happening randomly. Those who heard the river's call had often ignored small signs before, the breeze carrying the sound of their own name, slightly distorted reflections in the water, the feeling of being watched. Those who tried to resist felt a growing weight, as if their own legs were being sucked into the mud or the dark water. One of the investigators, Evelyn, felt something different that night. Looking at her reflection in the river, it wasn't behaving as it should. The surface seemed to breathe, rippling subtly, molding her face into expressions of terror that weren't there. She felt a slight, almost imperceptible tug that quickened her heart. Something down there was watching, calculating, waiting. Strategically positioned cameras revealed disturbing phenomena. These were not ordinary waves, they were rapid and precise distortions, appearing and disappearing in seconds. A fluid shadow traversed the surface, almost invisible, but laden with intention. And in some recordings it seemed as if the river called out the names of those observing, as if it knew exactly who was paying attention. The group began to theorize. Some suggested that the river was more than a natural force. Perhaps it was conscious. Perhaps it had memory. Perhaps each person who disappeared added something to its silent intelligence. Fear grew, transforming curiosity into paranoia. As the night wore on, the river seemed closer, more intimate. The sound of rushing water was constant, but it brought no relief. Every reflection, every tiny ripple, every whisper heightened the feeling that they were being closely watched, studied before the final moment. During the vigil, one of the investigators recorded something terrifying. The surface of the water formed a pattern resembling the outline of human hands, as if trying to grab anyone who dared to look closer. It was enough to send everyone back several meters, feeling a chill that ran down their spines and settled in their bones. Small revelations emerged. Objects that fell on the banks returned floating, as if the river wanted to play a game with those who observed. Shoes, pieces of clothing, extinguished lanterns. Always close to the bank, never completely submerged, reminding us that the human presence still existed, even if only partially. The most unsettling thing was the feeling of intimacy. Each investigator and each member of the group began to hear their own name being called, an almost inaudible whisper, which seemed to come from all sides, approaching and receding, compelling them to look at the water, to come closer. The tension grew unbearably. The group knew that any wrong step could be their last. And the river remained there, seemingly calm, meandering slowly, but laden with intentions impossible to decipher. One misstep, one hesitation, one curious glance, and it would take them without mercy, without warning, without a sound. The conclusion of Section 3 is clear. The river is not just dangerous, it is intelligent. It manipulates, it seduces, it knows every vulnerability and waits for the right moment. And for those who dare to observe it, the terror is only beginning. Night fell on the river, dense and silent. The mist enveloped trees and stones, and the river's whisper called each investigator by name. With each step, the group felt the weight of the water on their ankles, the pressure on their bodies increasing. Suddenly, a limb was pulled away without warning. No screams, no splashes. Lanterns fell to the bank, illuminating only the emptiness where someone should have been. They tried to flee, but the river held invisible legs, deforming the treacherous bank. More disappearances occurred in moments. The water writhed like submerged hands, precise and silent. Each reflection showed the faces of those who had already vanished, and the whisper intensified, revealing the intimate fears of each person. When the last investigator was taken away, the river returned to its still surface, reflecting the sky as if nothing had happened. Only marks in the mud, fallen lanterns, and floating objects remained as reminders of the horror that had occurred there. The river did not attack violently. It waited, observed, seduced. And it always called by name those who dared to approach. At dawn, the river seemed calm and harmless. The water reflected the pale sky, and a thin mist drifted slowly across the surface. To any visitor, nothing indicated the events of the previous night. The disappearances were officially classified as accidents. No bodies were found, no explanation given. But the survivors, the few who escaped the call, never came close again. Some faded with time, as if the river had taken something more than just their bodies, memories, courage, the will to speak. Tourists and curious onlookers continued to arrive, drawn by the river's tranquil appearance. Many heard whispers, some even calling out names, but ignored them, too curious to perceive the danger. The river doesn't threaten, it makes no noise, it doesn't choose the reckless or the weak. It simply calls, silently, patiently, waiting for the exact moment when you believe you are safe. And when that happens, there's no time to scream. There's no time to fight. Just silence. And the river closing in on you, because some places don't want to be seen, and others won't let you leave. If you enjoyed this approach and want to continue exploring stories that are almost never told this way, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And now, click on the video that's appearing on the screen. It directly complements what you just watched and may completely change the way you see this story.